Oh man, my worst advice is to ignore your gut. What your gut is telling you, you ignore that. You're on a path to failure.
Ignore. So that's bad advice. I should listen to my gut, Ross.
You have to. You have to. We get so many opportunities, as you know, and especially if you have any kind of success at all, then there's a lot of stuff dangling as low hanging fruit. And if there's money involved, there's the I don't know. It's kind of the temptation to take it. If your gut says no, don't take it, regardless of how much money they offer you.
That's good. So you had a story in your book, Rattled, which I absolutely loved. By the way, I devoured it last night in preparation for our conversation.
Wow,
So
thanks.
yeah.
Thanks.
Well, you sent it over, so I told you I would read it. It's really good. Lots of easy stories, super easy to digest. But
I'm
you share
glad.
that. Yeah. So you share that story about your guy that you ignored all the red flags on. Is that where you kind of learned to trust your gut
It
more?
was
and
one of the first
not ignore
times. It was one of the first times, and what Phil's referring to was a best friend. He was my very best friend, and I had a couple. He taught me how to sell, and then I a few years later offered him a job, and he betrayed me. Oh my God! And I should have noticed. I should have known this guy was a scumbag all along. But because I enjoyed hanging out with him and he made me laugh and I thought he had skills, I let some stuff go.
Yeah. Wow. So how old were you when that happened, Ross? Hopefully early in your career, early in your life.
Well, yeah, I was just out of college. I would have been 21. I first
Wow.
met him when I was 18, 19, and he taught me how to sell in a clothing store. And then I worked for a clothing chain later, and so I was 21, 22 years old.
Good. That's good. I'm glad you learned that early because
Yeah,
a
me
lot of
too.
us never learned that lesson.
I know, I know. And it probably took me a few other times to figure that out. But that was a huge wake up call. Pardon the cliche. That I better pay more attention to those flags.
Yeah. Yeah, good advice and good bad advice, right?
Good
So
bad advice.
because yeah, sometimes we don't trust ourselves. Sometimes maybe we have imposter syndrome about our own decisions and we think, "Oh, well I'm not experienced enough," but our gut's a pretty good judge of character, huh?
Yeah, and if there's money involved to tease you, sometimes that oh man, I can get through this. I'll be a better person. I'll have more money. I can have a better house. All that kind of thing. Not worth it. There's
Yeah.
a much easier pass when you trust your gut.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Ross, you have seen lots of success and lots of failures. It was
Yes,
interesting.
both ends of
reading
that.
your book. I'm like, woo. So okay, so yeah, success as a sales guy, got betrayed. Okay. Awesome comedian. You killed three people, or three people died, I guess, to get their jobs, right? You didn't kill them. So
Yeah,
right.
I didn't kill them, but you're right. They died, and I got opportunities, and I thought there was some connection to that.
Yeah.
Wow, that freaked me out for a long time.
Yeah. So did you? And I mean this. Did you have survivor's guilt, man? Because I was in the military, and I can tell you, some of my brothers and sisters weren't as fortunate as me. I mean, I delivered email by hand. I got paper cuts and stapled my finger a couple times. I didn't really have anything happen to me. So did you have any of that? Where you're like, why me? Why did this
Yeah,
happen?
absolutely. I thought there was some connection between somebody dying and then I get the opportunity, and I didn't feel deserving of it. I felt lucky, and so I tried to deny that luck was a factor because people work really hard. They go, oh, there's no such thing, but as it turns out, I think there is luck. I think luck does play into it, but it's this is also cliche. If you it's when preparation meets opportunity. That's kind of the crossroads that makes it happen for us. So yeah, but I had that guilt for a very long time.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, because that's really crazy how that would happen. Three different people, three different times, and yet I mean,
And they were
obviously you couldn't have planned it.
and they were big jobs, Phil. These were opportunities where I would go from a comedian to a television host. And then other opportunities where I would be maybe a local television host, and then I get a network job, and that happened too many times for me to think it was just luck.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the talk show host because I think that's
Yeah.
kind of interesting and probably something that most of us are not going to get to do in our lifetime is host a late night show. I
Hey,
mean,
what are you talking about? You're doing it right now.
oh, Gee, I missed that. Oh,
Yeah.
thanks, Ross. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, but that's interesting, right? If we rewind, though, that wasn't always the case.
No, it
There
was
were
not.
3 stations, right? 4 stations.
That's right.
And that was it, man. I mean, you either Letterman, you were Leno or Johnny Carson, right? Or you were somebody else. And you were the somebody else there on the Fox, right? So
Yeah,
how
right.
did that, how did you prepare for that? Because one of your lessons in the book that you talk about really, really clearly is about rehearsing life.
Yeah.
And I would bet that probably helped.
It does. I do think that we should, in any job that anybody ever thinks about taking, I think you should rehearse that. I think you should try it out. You should moonlight either in your head or talk to somebody who's done that job before and find out if it's really the dream position you want or if it's got some hidden nightmares or some trap doors that you didn't see. So in response to your question, I had an opportunity pretty early in life at 30 years old, to host a local television show. And we had a lot of bumps and bruises, and we thought we'd be canceled every 13-week period. Well, and after 4.5 years on that job, I was ready to go national and try to convince the local station to go national. They had 4 or 5 other stations in their network. They refused. So now I'm itching. Now I really want to take the next step. And I watch every late night talk show. I follow Johnny Carson. I look at Letterman. And then Joan Rivers gets the job on the Fox network. And so here's how arrogant I am, Phil. I'm watching Joan Rivers, who's an established comedian, and she was filling in for Carson. When I'm at home, I could do better than that. I know I could do better. I could ask better questions. My team can come up with funnier stuff than that. So I'm like that. So now I'm kind of frustrated, and I can't even tune into it now. So I'm working really hard on our local show, and our local show was very successful, numerous Emmy Awards and National Comedy Awards and so forth. And then, so I felt like I'd already rehearsed this for 4.5 years. I was rehearsing that job. And then I get the call from my agent. They want to see you in Los Angeles. Okay. I don't even think at that time, oh my God, this is too much pressure. In my head, in my arrogant head, I'm thinking, it's about time they called me. And they had dozens of hosts try out to replace Joan Rivers when she left. And she was fired, actually, because there's some circumstances with her husband that he was meddling. And Barry Diller, who was running the network at that time, didn't like him. Nobody liked him. And so they said, you gotta ditch the husband. He can't be around here anymore. And Joan said, well, if he's going, I'm going. And Barry Diller said, really? That'd be great. That was the end of her tenure. And then they started this national hunt. So I had been rehearsing, I feel, practically every week on my local comedy show. So when I got there, I knew what I was doing. I had an overabundance of confidence that I just took over when I got my shot. And after that show, they offered me the job. So that was the time to get nervous. It's when you really get the offer. But up to that point, I felt like I was in a good position.
Well, you say that's confidence, but I would argue that's preparation, Ross. You were prepared. You were doing the work, right? I don't think that, confidence, to me anyway, confidence comes from preparation. Confidence comes from knowing what you're getting into. Confidence comes from doing the work. And a lot of times we get nervous because we've never done that work before. So you did that work for 5 years.
Yeah.
They just changed the channel, right? They went from local affiliate channel 4 to national affiliate channel 10, right? That was all that was.
It was that. And I was prepared. I was practicing every week and trying to be great every week. So standards along the way. We use the network talk shows as our boy, that was a Freudian slip, wasn't it? The network talk show host as our benchmark. And we said we could be as good as that. And you know what? We had some feedback too. Saturday Night Live obviously was huge, but on our little comedy show, we were very critical of Saturday Night Live, and I think people can be to this day. When you watch a sketch, you think, "You that's the ending? Where's the big laugh? You just go to commercial." So we were very careful on our show to have beginnings, middles, ends. If we had a premise, we wanted to prove the premise. There was going to be an explosion, we thought, at the end, and we would work very hard on our punchlines. And that's one of the reasons we got to National Comedy Awards, is because people recognized that these kids in Seattle were really finishing a sketch.
Yeah. Well, not just that, but you talk about in the book in Rattled, you talk about also you continued to prepare even after the show was delivered. That you kept going there to do that. And I will tell you, Ross, I don't know a lot of comedians, but I do know a lot of speakers. And I can tell you that some of them are a mile wide and about an inch deep. And if you get them off their platform, they don't know anything. So I find that really refreshing to hear how you did that. So talk about, you know, kind of the over preparation and how that served you well.
Okay, so that I'm glad you actually brought that up, because I think that could be a lesson other people might learn from, and that is that I know exactly what you're talking about with regard to people who are a mile wide and inch deep. They give the appearance that they know what they're talking about until they get stumped, and I never wanted to be stumped with an interview. I was interviewing, and because our show was successful, I was able to interview world shakers, business leaders, celebrities. And I didn't want to come off as a dolt. So I researched them. You know, what you did just before our little interview here is you got my book and you read the book. Most people, Larry King, never read a book. He told me, I don't read a book. I just ask the questions. I let them tell me about the book. Really, Larry? That's how you prep? And he says, no, I don't prep. I have enough confidence that I can ask the right questions. And I like Larry a lot, but no, he didn't. His lack of prep did not help him do that job. Well, I'm a young guy. I'm in the Seattle market, which I think of 13 in national. I better be better. So yes, I would study throughout the day. I would study after the show was over. I would look at my tapes to see what I did right and what I fumbled on. And I read books. I wanted the whoever I was going to interview to know that I'd paid attention and that I wasn't going to ask a dumb question. I studied all the talk shows for that reason, so there's an example of this. I hosted a show and I had a co-host and had a very famous person on. Gregory Peck was on once, and famous authors, and I'd be getting in deep with the subject, and I said, what book have you not written that you really want to write someday? And before my guest, who was famous, could answer, my co-host said, do you like dogs? Oh man, really. Now, I learned this lesson. I actually learned this lesson from another talk show host who some in your audience may know, Dick Cavett.
Yeah.
Dick was an erudite guy. He knew a lot of things about literature and science and so forth. And and he didn't pay attention sometimes to his guests because he was worried. He was on the network, he's on an ABC network, and he was worried that he had to pay attention to the cue cards that were just off stage, and he had to go to the next question if there was a lull, and it distracted him. This is what happened. He had this guy on who would go down in the ocean, and then he'd find buried treasure in the ocean and so forth. And he was an animated guy. And so he's sitting on the show with Dick, and he's saying, yeah, I'll tell you what happened, Dick. We got down there, I don't know, about 800 or 900 feet. Nobody had ever been that deep before. We found this old chest in a galleon, the Spanish galleon. We brought it up to the sand, had our welding equipment, very expensive welding equipment. We get the straps, and finally we break open the top of that chest. You're not going to believe what we found inside. And Cavett looks at him and goes, do you have any hobbies? Really, Dick? He said he almost lost his job. He lost his job almost. He said, Dick, you got to pay attention. When somebody talks, listen to what they say. Don't look at the cards. Well, I didn't want it to get boring. The guy wasn't boring, Dick. He had us on the edge of the seat. We didn't know if there's a skeleton or gold. We didn't know. So I never wanted to make that mistake.
So do you have any hobbies?
Yeah. Do you have any hobbies?
Do you like dogs?
Yeah, I like dogs.
That's terrible.
Yeah. Forget about this. Forget about what we found in the sand there, Dick. Yeah. But you see that when you study talk show people, you know when they're not on it, they're not. I'll tell you, this is something that Dennis Miller told me, because people think Dennis is just brilliant, smart, uses these obscure references, and I said, God, Dennis, you really work hard on these referencing, because I know the references. I'm no Bill Maher. Bill Maher is really that guy. He really knows long, wide, and deep who he's talking to, what he's talking to him about. I'd like to get there, but I'm a comedian. I want to make this a funny show. We don't have to get so in depth. But I admire both Dennis and Bill for what they do and how they prepare.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, that's fantastic, and that's a great lesson that we need to be present with the people that we're with. You talk about in the book, you talk about silent goodbyes, right? About being present.
That was Allison's story.
Oh, was that Allison's story?
Yeah,
okay, that one, because
Allison.
that one hit me, man. I read that last night. I had to read that a couple times. It made me a little teary eyed.
It's very emotional, and it was. I'll tell you a little
Please.
about that or in the story. Oh, hey, in case we're doing a little plug, this is the book Rattled that he's talking about.
Yeah, this book, right? So we'll
Allison,
put that over the top.
Oh, look at that! Look what you did. All right,
look at that. I'm fancy.
So Allison, my co-author, wrote a story about a man that she was married to, and then they split up and then back like 10 years later, they were getting back together, and he unexpectedly died very young, 57 years old, and a lot of people came to honor this man, Tony Cacciavellani, and she was supposed to speak at his memorial. And because of their long history, and she was a broadcaster herself and a news reporter herself, she covered Waco for 51 days. It would be expected that she would be able to get up and talk about her ex-husband. She froze, couldn't. It was too powerful, too much for her to speak. She felt bad that she couldn't give the memorial and wasn't prepared to say what she wanted to say at that very emotional time. And then she finally was able to do it in a Facebook post a while later. But her message was, if the inevitable is coming at some point, think about how you would behave or what you would say ahead of time. And that is almost like the rehearsing life idea. If we're going to be in these positions, what will you say? What will you do? Because you have the opportunity to influence and move other people. So I'm glad that moved you to read her story.
Yeah, well, the whole book was very poignant, funny, and yet really about resiliency and I would argue not getting rattled, right? I mean, though don't get rattled would be kind of a lame title. So rattled, it makes sense. Well, a single word, right, is super powerful, and I like that. But
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But Ross, you wrote half the book. Allison wrote half the book.
Yeah.
And yet you're able to give us her story out of that. So I have to ask, because I have seen a lot of people attempt to write together,
right,
and not seen a lot of people be able to give the other person's story. I mean, how is that? Have you read every story that she has? Do you live through? I mean, talk to me about that, because that's interesting.
Thank you. That was interesting for me. We had talked about writing a book for our kids, basically. What advice could we give our children? She has 2 children. I have 3 children. So we came up with this idea, and I had some ideas for titles. She had some ideas for titles, and then writing, she just dug in and wrote. There are 30 stories in the book. Allison wrote 60 of them. 60, and I wrote 30 plus or something like that. So we had 90 to pick from. So I was aware of what she was writing, and when she would write a story that would just target my heart, I thought, oh, we have to put this in. This is so good, and this could help some people. And that's kind of how we approached every one of those chapters, is that we really never argued about which story should go in the book. It was really obvious when one would fit, and others were fun. Everybody has interesting ideas and anecdotes in their life, or they meet people, but it just didn't fit the model, the Bible that we were going for with this particular book. Yeah. So I got very familiar with them. And then, when somebody tells you an emotional story, you don't forget it. It's something you live with, and then you may tell it to other people. So I think that also was a byproduct of how we could read or talk about each other's stories, because they meant something to us.
Yeah. Meaning is so important and so often overlooked.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Business, I've written a lot of business books, and as have you, and you're a speaker. And so we see people write about the business books, but sometimes they're vanilla. They get to they get to a lesson for how to do well in business, but they don't tell you the story about how you got there, what the trials and tribulations were, or the flameouts that we've all experienced. It's all about, hey, here's how great I am, and here's how I got to be so great. And it doesn't resonate too many times with humanity.
Right. Right. Well, that's going out with a bang, much like you did in your comedy, right? You're hitting this hard, and it makes sense to me that you would do that. I mean, because every story is so strong, and your format of the book was so interesting. I mean, truly, if all you read was the first part and the last part, and you missed this story, you'd get the point. It wouldn't touch your heart, but you get it. So you have why read this story first, and then what's in this for you at the closing. And I've not, again, Ross, if I showed you my library here, I mean, I've got 300 books just sitting here.
Oh, wow.
I don't have any books like that open with, okay, I'm going to convince you right now in 2 to 4 sentences why you should read this book. And then you're going to close and say, here's basically what you should have got out of this. And if it didn't touch your heart, well, maybe the next one will. So why did you pick that format, Ross?
I'm glad you, thank you for noticing that, because we are such a time-starved society. And we're now kind of a blog society. Give me tweet me what you want to say. I don't need to read a book about this. So we were going to be sensitive to that. And each chapter then, the 30 chapters starts with, why read this chapter? And so we want up front, we're thinking from the reader's perspective, what's in this for me? Okay, this looks like it's 2 or 3 pages long. Why should I read this? And so we just put that up front. Why should you read it? And then like you say, in a couple of sentences, if you think you've gone through these kind of problems, this chapter might be for you. And at the end, if you got all the way to the end, great, you read the chapter. Now what's in it for you? What are you going to get out of this? How can this relate to you? And so we were trying to kind of take the reader's perspective. If they read the first 2 sentences, I don't think I need this, then move on. We have plenty.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, that is the lesson in Rattled for me, is that, not everything resonates, not everything is there, but what does, I think, touches us hardcore. And one of the things that I think was important, and really, now that I'm talking to you, doesn't surprise me, but again, as a Hall of Fame speaker, as someone who's, been on TV and done a lot of cool stuff, when you said about humility, really touched my heart. You said, choose selflessness, right? That was a big lesson in humility and what the most important thing was. And I thought that was so interesting, Ross. So who do you get your humility from? Is that from parental units, or from growing up, or from your successes or your failures, or where do you get that humility from?
Well, I got it from my parents. My mother was just extraordinary. If you met her, you probably wouldn't learn much about her, because she'd spend the time talking about you. She'd ask you questions. She'd want to know more about you. And then she would make you feel better about yourself after you left talking to her. That was one of her, I think we could call it a technique or a trick, but it wasn't to her. She was just curious about other people. My father was the same way, because I kind of started after college, buying and selling businesses out of bankruptcy. And I thought, oh man, 22, 23 years old, 24, look what I've done. And I usually would meet people and then talk about, they say, what do you do? And what kind of job do you have? Oh, that would just launch me into telling about my businesses. My father said, you don't need to talk about yourself all the time. You know everything about you already. Why don't you learn about somebody else? Oh, okay. Oh, I get it. I'm a bore. Yeah. You just shut up. So I did. I started shutting up, and so I learned that humility from my parents and my parents' friends. Oh, our house seemed to be like a landing spot for the neighbors and people. And my dad would make friends easily. My mother would make friends easily. And it was because they paid attention to others. They really made you feel important. And then people left thinking, I really like those Shafer people. They're really nice people. But they maybe not able to identify why, but it was because my parents showed extreme interest in them.
Yeah. Well, what Dale Carnegie says, right? If we're more interested in other people than we are in ourselves, we're gonna be good to go. I mean, that's obviously a kind of a paraphrase there, but I think that's really, really true. in that.
Can I give you one other piece of just
Please do.
of something that I learned over the years about people who are rising or going up their own particular ladder of career success or family success, and that is that if we can show interest in other people, you can meet people that would normally intimidate you. And what I mean by that, there a lot of people in business. Oh, my boss, or I don't want to talk. Oh, I've got a meeting with the boss. What do I say to the boss? You don't have to say anything really, as long as you're asking them questions. You just ask a question of your boss or somebody you want to meet, a celebrity or a business leader, and let them do the talking, and you nod and you show interest. They will start to look at you like a peer. They look at you completely different than they would if you were just trying to impress them with you. And this is what I opened the book, but with a really embarrassing story about meeting Bill Gates. And I was so impressed with myself that I thought he'd want to know me. He's a guy who wakes up and said, I changed the world today. So those people are busy. And his advice was, be brief. Completely threw me. I didn't know what to do when he said that. And so I never got him on a television show. He cut our interview short, and I left thinking, wow, I couldn't have screwed that up worse than I did by trying to think he'd be impressed with what I had done in television. So it kind of just don't be intimidated by people. As long as you can ask them about themselves, you'll win, and you'll get to know people you never thought you'd get to know.
Well, that's great advice. And you bounced back from that brief time with Bill Gates
Yeah.
and learned strongly. One of the lessons in your book, in Rattled, is the two words that I need to practice more, and that's "so what," which I think is interesting, right? Obviously, you bounced there, right? You bounced there from your football coach. Maybe you did. Maybe it took you a little longer, right? Sometimes "so what" it takes a little longer to learn. But talk to me about "so what," because I think that's such an important lesson for those of us that screw up, which would be all of us.
Yeah, I think we take our screw ups too seriously. That's where that lesson came from. My football coach was this brute of a man. Did he have a real high IQ? No, I don't know. It didn't matter. But you make a lot of mistakes when you're in a team sport. And so he would shout at us, and he's 6'5", 260 pounds. If you missed a tackle, you missed a catch, he'd get in your face and go, "So what? So what? Let's do better." And now, all these years later, when the ball players get together for some reunion, that's all we talk about is Big Wally's "so what." We all make mistakes. So what? Get on with it. When you watch sports, they'll say, "Oh, that athlete has a short memory." What they're saying is he screwed up. Well, here, Tom Brady threw 2 interceptions this past weekend. He's at the top of his game. He must have a "so what" attitude. He has a short memory. Okay, I threw an interception. Let's get to the next play. Let's go to the sidelines and look at the play again and see where I made that mistake. If you can adopt the "so what" attitude, it just allows you to get over the problem, and you don't keep looking in the rearview mirror and beating yourself up for something that maybe you did make a mistake. Maybe it was a misstep. So what? So you have time to recover. That was his point.
Yeah, that's such a strong point. It's never too late. We always can recover, and we definitely have to learn from those mistakes, because if we don't, we keep repeating them.
Yeah, we do.
That becomes trouble. Then it's "oh what" instead of "so what," right?
Yeah, or it's "not again." Yes, I did. Yeah. I've done that many, many times.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that, Ross. Let's talk about starting over here as we're getting closer to the end here. You went from comedian to talk show host to broke to Hall of Fame speaker, right? So
right.
So let's
right.
so I want to talk about that jump to Hall of Fame speaker, because that's interesting to me. That as a fellow speaker, I've been on the cover of NSA Speaker magazine too, Russ. I was this big, but I was on there too. So I shared it with people.
I thought I recognized you.
There you go. Yeah, I'm the guy way in the back. I was waving, remember? So that was me. But yeah, so talk to me about that, Ross. How you go from all of that to writing about business, which I think is very interesting. And speaking about business, how does that transition happen, and what'd you do to make that work?
Well, I'll be as brief as I can about that transition because when I was young and did not want to work for myself, I started buying and selling companies out of bankruptcy court. And you could buy them for nothing. You can still do it today. And so at one point, I bought 23 different companies, bought and sold them. I got ulcers, and I got to change my attitude. But I had money, and I was doing fine. I went to comedy clubs, and I thought, oh wow, this looks like fun. This is in the mid '80s, I guess, when they were starting to catch fire. And so I had some jokes that I would tell people, my friends in the living room, and so I tried an open mic night, and it turns out that there's a science to that. I followed the science. I had a coach who said, get three, to be on the Tonight Show, you're going to have to get 6 laughs a minute. Well, that's a lot in a minute, but I followed that. I honed my material, and I won comedy competitions, which then led to television. And I had a lot of success in television for about a dozen years. And I always thought that would be my ending career. I thought I was going to be Johnny Carson. I thought I would always host a talk show. And I got to that point in my life on the Fox network where I was competing against Carson, competing against Letterman. And then I hosted some game shows. And I thought, oh, this is going to be my career. And then it all fell apart. It fell apart because when you're canceled, like I was, from 4 network television shows, the phone stops ringing. And I went back to the comedy clubs, and I had a family. That's really hard on a family. So I was in trouble. Then I went through a divorce, and now half of my fortune went away. And I'm back in an apartment paying child support and figuring out what the hell am I going to do now? I can't get anybody to give me a television show anymore. And what I did then, and I talk about it in the book, is if it ever happens to you and you have to start over in your mid 40s, then you got to take an inventory of what you know. And I was a comedian, so I knew that. I had run businesses, I knew that. And I put feelers out. Is there any way that I could speak about both of those topics? Well, you can't just get a paid gig to do that if people don't know you for doing that. So I took every free job I could: Rotary clubs, Kiwanis Club, Moose Lodges, anywhere where I could showcase my acumen about business, and I had some, and tell jokes, and I had those. And that after about 90 free events, somebody said, we'd like to pay you. And I think I got $250 or something, which was a lot less than my network television money, but I was starting over. I had to suck it up and start over. One job led to another, and then by the year 2001, I'm getting some traction, and 9/11 hits, and the planes now won't fly, and so now I can't make it to those jobs. So it was more clawing, scratching, begging until it recovered a little bit, and then I wrote a book called Nobody Moved Your Cheese in 2002. Talking about all those kinds of, which is kind of a throwback to what Rattled is in a way, a lot of short stories about my adventures. Anyway, it started to get some traction, and I was starting to be believable as somebody who really did know about businesses and knew about comedy and performance. And so that actually resurrected me from being broke. And I was in debt. I was $250,000 in debt from my divorce, and I rallied. And then within a very short time, it created another career for me that's sustained for a couple of decades now.
Awesome. That's great, man. That's really cool. So,
but I would say that those who are watching this, you all have an inventory of skills and talents. Go back to those and don't. It hasn't been for naught. Your whole career wasn't just like, why did I pick that path? Well, you picked that path, and now you have those skills and talents. Use those for the next adventure you're going to have, because I think anybody can reinvent.
Definitely. So I'm guessing that probably helped you through the COVID crisis too, right? That you'd already reinvented, that you got all of that. I mean, did you do a lot of virtual, or how did no,
I didn't do a lot. No,
through there.
I know. I talked to Jay Leno a week ago, and I said, "How did you make it through because I knew he did 150 live events for big money." And he goes, no, I didn't go out, but I did 75 virtuals at half price. It was all right to me. Well, that's a tremendous success story. I didn't have that kind of success. And in fact, I was thinking at that time, what would be the next reinvention? And it led to the book Rattled, where it wasn't about business specifically. It was about how to manage and be resilient in tough times. So that gave Allison and I something fun to work on. And eventually we hoped that COVID would be over. And even if it wasn't, we had something for our children. So I think we should expect that life is always going to throw these curveballs. There's a chapter in the book called Expect Accidents to Happen. Expect your life to be turned upside down. What will you do when everything you've known turns to garbage? What then how will you? Some people crumble. Some people will just fail and be miserable and end up in psychotherapy. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with psychotherapy. I'm just saying that resilience, if you can learn how to be resilient, you can get through it. You can weather any storm, as the saying goes.
Absolutely. I think that's the big lesson from your book, from Rattled, Ross. It's a great, great book. I love it.
Thanks, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, it like I said, every story could stand on its own and think about it and be that way. I'd love to see the other 60. Maybe you put it together as a, as a yearly reader or something like that.
Well, we have them.
They're good.
We have them, and we're going to encourage people. Everybody has stories like this. So we're going to encourage readers to look. If you have a story that you'd like to see in one of our future books, let us know. Resilience and practicing resilience is always going to be a popular topic, I think, and we'd love to hear from our readers to tell us what happened to you. How did you get past that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's so funny. Nobody Moved My Cheese. I think that's the first book of yours I read, Ross, a long time ago.
Was it really?
Yeah. So when you said that, because I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. So that's pretty cool, man.
I feel there's a lot of things that motivate people to write. And I was angry when I wrote that book. I was angry that we had gone through 9/11 and it attacked our country. And then it destroyed my shot at getting another career. So when I went after that, I was lambasting people like Jack Welch and Dr. Phil and anybody who the country was taking advice from. I thought, you don't take their advice. Trust your own gut. And so I was kind of pissed off at these people who thought they could give us advice. And here we are post 9/11. And when I was trying to get some traction in the speaking industry and I was contacting agents, all the agents said, hey, that nobody moved your sheet. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot. That will never do anything. And in fact, it has no application whatsoever in our speaking industry. And I go, really? Well, I don't know what else to write. And so they said, good luck, man. And it turned out to be a bestseller. It did have an edge, and it did kind of took the veil off of what we thought were pop culture icons that we should be bowing to. So this is that's what I would tell any of you out there, that if you've got an idea about this, please trust yourself and not trust experts that are people who call themselves necessarily experts, because you have to live with you. Nobody knows your own drive. Nobody knows what you're capable of. And there are lots of people who give you advice that don't do that. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Okay, well, you're not me. So shut up and let me fail on my own.
There you go. That's great advice, man. And that gets us right back to the worst advice that you got there, right? Going against your gut. So go with your gut, right? Trust yourself. And then, Ross, you were nice enough to give us some best advice that you prepped us with. So as we bring this home, share the advice about picking a lane and why that's so important.
Oh, well, great, Phil. It's to, first of all, find your lane. What is it that is easier for you? This is something people go, oh, well, I want to try this profession or that profession. Oh, my friend does this and he can get me a job over there. Forget all that. What is your lane? What is it that comes easily to you? And we don't often pay attention to that, because things that come easily to us don't seem like that's the right path. Isn't life supposed to be super hard? No. Find your lane, focus on your lane, and forget everything else that is clogging up your lane. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's art for you. Maybe it's photography for you. Maybe it's telling jokes. Maybe it is telling stories. Maybe it is writing scientific manuals that interest you enough that you could get up and do that every single day. That's your lane, man. That's exactly where you should be. So focus on that thing. Get good at that thing. And don't be distracted by all of these other temptations, including money or friendships or people who are trying to get you, to influence you, family, friends, spouses. They don't know you. They don't know what you're really capable of. And then when you find that lane, then you can get up and do it every day. It doesn't feel like work to you. It feels like something you should be doing, and you can make a contribution. So then you become the go-to person. Then you become the person that everyone will call because you're really specialized in that lane, that thing. That's where respect comes. That's where the money will come. That's where influence will come. So find your lane, stay in your lane, avoid the distractions.
Wow, that's great advice, Ross. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So, folks, if you're listening here, I strongly encourage you to go get a copy of Rattled. Every story in it is interesting. Every story in it can change your life if you let it. So get a copy of Rattled. Go to rossshafer.com. We're kind of hiding underneath here, but I want to show you what the book cover looks like, because it's important that you see it. Ross, I really appreciate that you took some time with us today to share your stories and help us not get rattled and to be more resilient in the coming years. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Oh, and there's a video. We have if you're on social media, we have these little video vignettes that Allison and I put together called Rattled. They're only a couple minutes long, but we think they're fun and they should spark some conversation around your house.
Cool. So and find those. Follow Ross on social media, right? You'll find him on Instagram and on
Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, wherever. And the books are everywhere now.
Absolutely. Yeah, books are everywhere. So, Ross, thank you once again so much. You get, like I said, go to rossshafer.com, check it out, follow Ross on social, and don't get rattled.
All right. Thank you, Phil.
All right. Thanks.
Have a good day.